Hello, and welcome to the 8th Biennial Men Who Care Luncheon in support of Helpmate. My name is Art Mandler, and I'm a member of the organizing committee for this event. Helpmate is the only organization in Buncombe County providing a full range of services to victims and survivors of intimate partner abuse. By sheltering families escaping violence, operating a 24-hour hotline, and providing court advocacy, counseling, and education, Helpmate provides hope to thousands of women and children trapped in violent relationships. So it makes sense that the courage of hope is our theme for today's gathering. During the height of the pandemic lockdown, stay home and stay safe too often had an ironic meaning for survivors in abusive homes. As joblessness, isolation, and other stresses increased, so did levels of reported violence. For those threatened by violence, and for our entire community struggling to limit COVID-19 infections, it took a whole new level of courage to reach for and hold on to a sense of hopefulness in the face of so much pain and loss. But we did hold on. Survivors showed even greater strength in resisting the oppression of violence. Helpmate staff showed tremendous flexibility and creativity as they navigated new procedures to protect the community not only from violence, but also from contagion. And the greater community, all of you who are paying attention, all of you who care, reached out with incredible generosity to support Helpmate's mission. Over 25 years ago, Dr. John Stewart had a vision of getting men more involved in the support of Helpmate's work, both financially and as advocates for greater societal awareness of the roots of domestic violence. Every other year over the past 16 years, we have invited men from this community to come together to show our support for this important work, not only by digging deep into our wallets, but also by learning about the traumas, the terrors, and the courage of women and children trapped in cycles of violence. This is the second year that we felt the need to make this a primarily virtual event. Last year's Women's High Tea was viewed online by hundreds of women who managed to create a feeling of cohesion and community despite the format. This year, with the virus somewhat on the wane, we have a sense of being able to breathe more freely again. Some of you are hopefully watching today in small gatherings that once again feel safe and more supportive rather than threatening and awkward. But whether you're sitting at home alone or together with friends, welcome. Thank you for making the decision to be here with us and to be a part of the solution. The Helpmate staff does amazing work, but without the backing of the greater community, that work couldn't go on. You, all of you, make it possible. If you tuned in a bit ahead of time, you saw the list of our extraordinary sponsors who have generously supported this gathering. I want to thank them for their support, and if you know or do business with them, please thank them as well. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of Helpmate, April Burgess-Johnson.
Good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us today. I'm April Burgess-Johnson, and I have the privilege of serving as Helpmate's Executive Director. For well over 40 years, Helpmate has provided safety, shelter, and support to survivors of domestic violence. We offer these critical services for one important reason: to help survivors find hope. Here's an interesting thing about hope. Hope isn't a state of being. It's not passive. Hope is a verb. It's active. Hope is a thing you do. It's an action you can take alongside another person. At its core, hope has two components: the belief that things can change and the action of doing something to enact that change. This action of doing hope is a feat that sometimes takes great courage. As you move through this program, you'll see the brave acts of hope manifest in multiple ways. Frank will tell you about the courage it takes to hope you have raised a young man who embodies compassion and care for others, and what it takes to be that young man. Kelda will demonstrate in myriad ways what bravery it takes to endure and escape someone who tried to steal her hope. You'll hear from Dr. Stewart, who took hopeful action in founding Men Who Care 25 years ago. And you'll have the opportunity to do and to give hope yourself. It's strong, compassionate, and courageously hopeful people like you that make me grateful to live in our community. It's your example that young people are following. It's your support that survivors need to find their own strategies to act on their hope. I want to give some special thanks to three groups of hope doers: the Sternberg family, the men of Parsec Financial and the Reynolds families have joined together to offer a special challenge gift to inspire others to share in their effort to support survivors. Please join them and me in hoping for a brighter day and helping to make it so. I hope for a day when all our children grow up in safe homes where they know they're loved. A day when our community holds accountable those who do harm and believes, supports, and cares for those who survive harm. I look forward to a day when we all have the courage to hope. I'm now pleased to introduce Frank Castelblanco. Frank is the AHEC Director and Chair of the Department of Continuing Professional Development at the Mountain Area Health Education Center. I've had the pleasure to work with Frank many times over the years, and I've found him to be a thoughtful, caring leader. He leads by example. He has the courage to act on hope. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. My name is Francisco Castelblanco, and I'm excited to be here today to speak to you about something that I care incredibly about, which is Helpmate, but more importantly, the roles that we play in our society. In my opinion, I think that males have a perpetuated role that we play. In other words, we're cast as the head of household, we're cast as the breadwinners, the decision makers, and I don't think that has to be the case, because with these roles come certain expectations that I believe can contribute to intimate partner violence. And so it's important to differentiate the positivity and those aspects that can come from that, but more importantly, how we can go forward and raise better young men. And so I want to go back to the way that I was raised. I was raised by a single mom who was a CNA. She's one of the strongest women, definitely the hardest working individual that I'll ever know in my life. And as a young man, she always taught me the word correcto. And it's a Spanish word. And it means to be correct, but in a very different way. There's a lot more that comes with the word correcto. Correcto means somebody who holds themselves to the highest level, the highest standards, who is not being judged by somebody, but judged themselves on what is the right thing to do in all situations. And so it obviously entails having great manners, but making decisions based upon what is best for individuals around you, what is best for the family. And so my mom taught me this from a very early age, and I'm teaching my son that even though we're Latino, right, we're part of a Latinx culture in the United States, the machismo, that word that comes forward in many instances does not apply to us, right? The word correcto applies to us, and that he should live his life the way that I've tried to live mine. And one of these very basic tenets, he's 16 years old now, and he's starting to date and ask girls out, is the very simple thing of asking for consent to the level of even holding a girl's hand. And that, I think, is an important premise to even start off with, right? Something as simple as that most of us wouldn't think twice of, the way that we grew up in the world, now we should, right? And we should look at things from a very different perspective. And we should not only hold ourselves to the highest standards, the highest levels of being correcto in the world, but actually teach our young men and women also these components, because I think going forward, this is part of how we can change the cultures, right? It doesn't have to go forward the way it always has been. And this is an important piece of how we go forward. One other aspect that I wanted to talk quickly about today is just the incredible success and benefits that Helpmate has provided for individuals. Last year, my mother fell and she broke her hip, and unfortunately she was not able to return back to independent living. And so because of that, we had to give away a lot of her belongings. And I connected with Helpmate, and I was connected with two individuals, two women one who had 3 kids and one who didn't have any kids, but both were in need of furniture and housewares and clothing. And even during a time of COVID, it was just such a heartfelt thing to be able to do for these women, to be able to provide what my mom had, right? Just housewares and furniture that she had collected in her lifetime, and more importantly, taken really good care of. And I knew that my mom's strength and her legacy would go with these belongings. And so I was excited to share those with these individuals, with these women. And I shared the stories of who she was and how she was such an important part in raising me and my brother and sister so that we could do the right thing in life and be correcto. So with that, I thank you and excited for you to be part of this program.
I grew up in a small Christian commune that was very insular. We didn't have our own money or cars. We weren't allowed to date as teenagers, so I had never dated before, ever. And so when I was 19, I left the commune. You know, they had given me $500 when I left and a plane ticket, and that was the end of it. I'd never been to a grocery store to buy food. It was just a completely alien world to me. Initially, I think what drew me in was just that I was really lonely. I didn't have any friends in Asheville, and he was just someone that was always available. It was definitely comforting to have someone who knew how to drive and shop at a grocery store, and someone who didn't seem to care about how weird I was. I was working 2 jobs. He was in and out of work all the time, so I was the main provider of everything. When I was 21, I got pregnant with our son, and you know, I hadn't had much knowledge of birth control or, you know, how to have protected sex. My ex started becoming more abusive, and I think it was because he knew he now has even more control over me, and I'm not going to leave easily because now, you know, he helps with childcare. He's the father of my son, so he started being physically abusive with me. One night when my son was around a year old, I wouldn't have sex with him, and he held a knife to my throat, and he punched me in the nose, and just things like that happened more and more frequently. Like, we had a shotgun in the house, and he would hold it loaded to my head and threaten to shoot me. But I still was so afraid to leave him. He had so much control over me. But one day I was about to go to work, and he threatened to run away with our son while I was at work. Instead of going to work, I went to the police, and I told them that he was threatening to take my son, and they said, "Well, do you have a custody order?" And I said, "No," and they said, "Well, then there's actually nothing we can do about that." But I did end up telling them about the physical abuse too, and they could do something about that. So I waited at the police station while they arrested him. But then he got back in contact with me, and I was still very much in his influence and just brainwashed by him. And so he seemed so sincere and so different. So I lived with him again for over a year. He would just come in at night into my bedroom and like try to force me to have sex. And when I refused and tried to push him off of me, he would just hold me down and like threaten to kill me. And at the time I found this program where I could build my own house through Mountain Housing Opportunities. Luckily, the mortgage was only in my name, which he was really upset about, but I was not going to budge on that because at this point, I knew, like, I cannot stay with this person. I told him he had to leave. And of course, once I told him he had to leave, he got a lot more violent. One night, like, he pulled me off the bed and just like smashed my head against the floor over and over again. And after that night, when he left the house that morning, I went to the cops and they took pictures and they told me to go to the hospital. And they did tell me to get a rape kit, but I didn't want to because it was too invasive. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to admit that I was being raped by my own boyfriend. I was so afraid because he had told me so many times, if you leave me, I'm going to kill you. When I went to court to get a restraining order again and to press charges, the helpmate office was there, and I cannot tell you enough how they were like the best thing that could possibly have been in the courthouse. And just being able to like enter that terrible, like scary big courthouse and go into that little office there, the helpmate office, and just feel like protected and cared for was life-changing. I don't know if I could have done it without that office there. It was just like a lifesaver. They gave me so much courage to keep fighting. I think the biggest help that they provided was listening kindly to my story and believing me. Because so many people are dismissive or think it's your fault. I think there's a common misconception that it's the victim's fault, what happens to them, that they should just leave, that what are they doing? Like, why are they so foolish staying with someone that's abusing them? I was in that situation for 6 years. And it was very hard to escape and very dangerous for me. Listening without judgment and with love was like the biggest help I could possibly have had at the time. They would go into the courtroom with me and sit next to me. And he was in there and it was so scary and just, it felt like a human shield having them there. So, and it felt like they were my friends. Like I could talk to them every time I went there. And it made it seem just a lot better. So I'm really grateful.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Graham Reynolds, and I serve as the chair-elect of the Helpmate Board of Directors. It is my privilege to represent Helpmate and to speak to you today. I grew up in Asheville. This is my home, and I'm proud to serve this city, both as a professor at UNC Asheville and as a volunteer for Helpmate. Over the last hour, you have heard about the life-changing work being done by the staff and volunteers at Helpmate. The effort they put forth every single day is remarkable, and it's not a cushiony job. People's lives are at stake. People are depending on Helpmate to protect and shelter them. These needs do not come and go in our community, but instead are present every day of the year. Helpmate answers the call to serve our community's most vulnerable citizens. Survivors come to Helpmate for safety, shelter, and support. The staff and volunteers are ready at all times to provide one of life's basic necessities: hope. Hope that things will get better, hope that the abuse will end, and hope that survivors and their children might find peace. You have been invited to this event, the biennial Men Who Care Luncheon, to bear witness to the work of this amazing organization. Helpmate and the survivors we serve deserve to know that the community knows about their work and their efforts. You are here because Helpmate and the survivors of domestic violence and abuse need you. They need your support, and they need you to believe in this mission, to believe that survivors deserve safety, shelter, and support, and they need you to believe that this work must continue. The past 17 months have been a challenge beyond what most of us have experienced. Our lives have been upended, altered, and even threatened. There's been a challenge for you and I, but you had better believe it has been an even greater challenge for the survivors of domestic violence and abuse. Think, right now, about some of the difficulty you might have experienced. And now imagine how much more traumatic that difficulty would be if you were simultaneously facing threats to your life, physical and injurious violence, emotional manipulation, and financial non-independence by someone who you previously thought cared about you. These last 17 months have been dark times indeed, and the survivors that Helpmate serves have had it the hardest of all. Now imagine if those survivors had nowhere to turn, no one to call for help, nowhere to go. How could they escape? Where would they go? How could they ensure that their abuser would never come for them again? Their life and their future hangs in the balance. Helpmate has worked in Buncombe County for over 4 decades, providing hope and life-saving services to thousands of survivors. Without Helpmate, hope would have been lost and lives would have been lost. Helpmate relies upon a few crucial sources of funding to continue to operate, and this year Helpmate is facing its own crisis. The Victims of Crime Act provided significant operational funding to Helpmate and organizations like us, both in the county and across the state. Helpmate is facing several years at a minimum without this support. Helpmate and the survivors we support need your help now more than ever. The last 17 months have indeed been a challenge, but I'm challenging you now to stand up and say that you believe in Helpmate, that you believe that survivors deserve our support, and that you believe that we can do better and be a force for good in this county. Your colleagues and neighbors have already stepped up, offering a challenge gift for this event. When you support Helpmate today, you can help to unlock that gift, and together we can show this community that we believe in the mission of Helpmate. Our support is the fuel that gives encouragement to the staff and volunteers. It is our way of saying we want you to continue this hard, emotionally tiring, and life or death work because we need you. Asheville and Buncombe County need you. Consider what value you place on the safety of our fellow citizens and give to Helpmate now. And so to my fellow men today, I challenge you to stand up for our community and say no more. No more will we accept violence and abuse against our community. No more will we allow our fellow men to treat women without regard for their humanity or their agency. No more will we leave our vulnerable citizens without support, care, and shelter. We will be the force for good in this community. We will be the providers of hope. Please send in your support today. This is our community. These are our citizens. This is our responsibility. Thank you for your support.
My name is John Stewart, and it's my pleasure to offer a few words in closing. I want to thank everyone involved in the production of today's program. Our sponsors, our Helpmate Board Organizing Committee, our videographer, Katie Damian, all of our presenters, Art, April, Frank, Graham, and especially Kelda. I want to thank our hosts and each and every one of you who are viewing this program today, and encourage you to tell everyone you can about it, as it will continue to be available for viewing through the Helpmate website. As you've heard, our theme has been the courage of hope. In 30 years of working with the Helpmate, I have learned that the courage of hope is actually their product. It's what they distribute free of charge to all those who hope to end the scourge of domestic violence in their lives. HelpMate can continue this work only to the extent that the community supports them. I am sure that the men who care of our community can and will show how much they value this courage. So thank you, and may there be peace in your home